We're live.
All right, welcome back, everybody. This is going to be I'm making up the numbers, number 17 of the live streams that we
One of
do for
those.
Royals and Rogues.
I don't think we're at
Start
20 yet, right?
No, not yet, not yet. We're getting the close there, though. We're getting close. It's 16 or 17, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
But we were going to talk about we got a little bit some updates for Tycho Decay we can go to at the end. But this week you've been harking on this idea for a long time, and you finally kind of coalesced your thoughts around it. You wanted to present this theory to me.
Yes.
So figured we'd go through that, and I will absolutely play devil's advocate. So, Alec, take it away.
You
By
can't
the way,
help
I'm Robert.
yourself.
I'm the producer with Royals and Rogues on Tycho Decay. Alec Miller, he's going to be the director and all around jack of all trades for it. So, all right, Alec, take it
Yeah.
away. What is this theory that you
Okay.
have?
So I'm gonna preface this just a little bit, which is I find myself often in a really weird spot, and that is I sort of have one foot in both worlds at all times. And I never really like settle in a home. So like right now,
What worlds?
well, I'm about to get into that.
Okay, okay.
So like there's this world of kind of very like trait openness people that are very creative and very like liberal, and I mean that not necessarily only politically, just like they're very they live very adventurous kind of crazy lives. And that's my whole career, right? Like I'm around artists, I'm around motion designers, I'm around filmmakers. Kim and I, my wife, his name's Kim, we're about to go to like a dead things in jars convention, essentially, right? Like, but at those places I'm usually like the most like
No.
conservative. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hold up.
What?
Say that. Dead things in jars?
Yeah, it's like curiosities convention. So it's
So you mean that literally?
like literally skeletons in jars, dead snakes, taxidermied items, bugs,
Okay.
other weird things. I mean, those are just like kind of the main level things, but it's all about curiosities. So it could be like a pickled you know rodent or something like that. Like it could be whatever. It doesn't have
Okay.
to,
Okay.
and they don't
I
all
just
have
want to
to
make
be
sure. I
dead
didn't know if that was
things.
a euphemism or if
Right.
that was slang that yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Okay. Okay.
exotic plants, right? Like Venus flytraps. So
So
it's not just dead stuff. It's just
okay,
weird
so
things that
yeah,
people have.
that's a little on one side. Okay, and then the
Yeah.
other side is what's the other world?
Well, but I'm usually the most like conservative person there, right? I'm usually
Okay.
like I have a hat with a gun on it, right? Like and then
Touche.
when I go to like uh, church, let's say on a Sunday, or I go to like my family's house, or some other like more traditionally like more conservative place, I'm usually the farthest like trade openness person, right? My wife has a tattoo, right? I'm like, I'm into the arts. I swear, I drink, like, so I'm usually in this weird spot where I just kind of piss everyone off, right? Because like when I'm at the partiers, like in college, I'd always be like, "Hey guys, let's settle down." Like, and they all like, "Oh, Alec doesn't do drugs. Like, he's uptight or whatever." And then when I'm around, the liberal people are like, "Oh my gosh, this person is drinking whiskey," and then they just used a bad word, And so I find myself in this weird spot, and what I try to use it for is good, right? I try to use my power for good, and so what I try to do is like add nuance to things and bring people together. The problem is usually what I end up doing in that effort is like ticking everyone off. Like I usually end up offending both sides. So that might be what I'm about to do here.
Yeah. So
Um,
offend me. So what's the theory?
and so the theory is you can't be online for more than like an hour looking at like film reviews without hearing the phrase like "go woke, go broke," right?
Okay.
And it's this like sort of more conservative idea that if a movie has like a bunch of like kind of liberal ideology, right, in it, then it's gonna do poorly, or it's going to be a critical flop among audiences, even if maybe like the New York Times still rates it high. That's the general term, right? And the idea is it's bad, because it's woke. And my challenge to that is I actually think it's completely backwards. I think it's actually woke because it's bad. And I think that when you get these little sayings, they're kind of fun or whatever, but you can't just rely on them solely. You should actually ask, like, well, what's actually going on here, right? Because the idea is like, well, Hollywood's suddenly become all woke, right? Suddenly Hollywood's this like left wing bastion, and it's like, wait a second, is that new? Has Hollywood changed or has the movies changed? And I don't think Hollywood's changed. Like, it's not like Brokeback Mountain's a new movie. It's not like they haven't been like communist for most of their existence, right? Like the
Yeah,
idea that
yeah.
Hollywood was 10 years ago or 12 years ago or 30 years ago was this bastion of like right wing, values is absurd. And the other
So
thing is,
so
yeah, go
so
for it.
effectively you're saying if it's not that it's bad because it's woke, it's woke because it's already bad. So like the fundamental thing is that the art is bad.
Yes.
That's
So
why
what's
it's
what's
woke.
what's changed is the quality, right? So it's
Okay.
like the origin hasn't changed, right? The idea, the ideology of the people making it has always been, the farthest left society will let them go. So that's
Okay.
not new. What's new is how bad things are, like how crappy it is.
Okay.
And I would challenge anyone to find any of these quote unquote woke movies where the biggest problem with them is the wokeness. Like almost
Yeah.
always, there's like it's like the CGI sucks, the acting's bad, the writing's cliche, and then it also happens to have this ideology that is like then it gets the blunt of the critique, right? And there's a few examples I have of like, well, if that was the case, then anything that had woke ideology, right, anything that was this liberal thing should be a flop among audiences and possibly critics as well, and it should be considered like bad, right? and, and
Okay.
and that's not the case at all, right? So obviously you have all sorts of things like Arcane, right? Arcane is incredibly woke, right? Like it's probably one of the most woke series I've ever seen, right? There's the lead character, Vi is lesbian, right? There's a gay relationship that develops throughout it. It's about class warfare. All the men in it, like all their masculine traits of like leadership and intelligence, and all these things are kind of viewed as a negative trait almost, or at least they show the negative sides of them very clearly. There's sort of
Okay.
critiques of just traditional power structures, right? Of organization, and the only character with like no flaws, right? The only character that's like truly a good guy is Echo, right? Like
Yeah,
the
it's
young
Echo.
black man. And so it's like every character is like it's sort of funny because it's like the one exception to the rule of Arcane, which is like everyone's flawed, everyone's nuanced, everyone has like some dark motivation that's not just altruistic. And they're well, besides Echo, he's like literally purely good. Like so so it's one of those things where I look at that and I go, okay, so it's very, very woke, right? It has all the makings of a woke thing, even more woke than I think something like She-Hulk or something like that, which is like really just like men bad. Like that has like one woke point versus like this is getting like points for every single thing you could possibly have, and yet it's been a resounding success, right? Critically, box office, audience scores, and I love it too. Like I think it's a fantastic series. So and then you can look at why it's good. Like why is it good then, right? Because like if it's woke, it should go bad. It should be garbage. No one should watch this or enjoy this. And the answer is because it's good. Because it's so freaking good. Like it doesn't matter that it has a woke ideology if it's amazing, right? Every character has clear motivations. That's like exactly what they want. Why they're doing what they're doing. Okay, I'm
Mhm.
acting because I want to get my sister back. I'm acting because I hate the people that did this. I'm acting to get my father's approval. Like whatever it is. Every character has very kind of clear motivations. The audience understands it. They understand the stakes at hand. They understand why it's a big deal when Vi and Jinx meet. They understand what's happening at in each scene. It's not unlike kind of the there's all sorts of movies I feel like now where like I never know what the stakes are. I never know why I should care about anybody, and they make it
Yeah,
like
yeah.
very, very clear, right? And then it's just beautiful, right? It's gorgeous. The animation's great. The style is pretty much it, and Spider-Verse have triggered
It's
copycat,
unique.
like well, it
Yeah.
was unique, right? Until
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
everything else now is copying them because they were so successful and so good, right? And so like if that doesn't like convince you, I have one more example I'm gonna get to real quick, and then we'll move on to the kind of the next section. That's Blue Eye Samurai. So I was watching Blue Eye Samurai like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and I was just having a blast watching it. But as the series goes on, I'm like, holy smokes, is this thing woke, right? Like holy smokes, is it woke? It has like the show is literally about by the way, major spoilers for Blue Eye Samurai coming
For
up
me.
here. Yeah, for
For-
you. But for anyone else watching, well, I won't get into that. Anyways, for anyone watching, major spoilers for Black Samurai. But like the fact is, it's one of the wokest shows you can ever watch, right? Like it's like literally about killing the patriarchy, right? That's like literally what the story is about. It's like I want to kill my father. And she doesn't know who her father is, so it's like I'm gonna kill everyone until I get to my dad. And like I can't think of a really like more anti like traditional family values than I want to kill my father, literally. And then every single father figure, or like literal father, I should say, not even father figure, is like evil. Like there's a secondary female character, her dad's evil, and at the end she ends up killing or entrapping him. It's kind of left vague what his fate is. But like he's bad. And dies for
Okay.
it. Like her dad
Okay.
is, obviously she's trying to kill him. She doesn't find, I think, her actual dad at the end, but
Okay, it doesn't matter. I'm
anyways,
not
so
as someone who has not seen the show,
right.
that makes no I don't. Okay.
And then
So
the villain gets to this laughable point. Um this guy, it gets so funny. He like literally just goes on rants, like almost looking at the camera, and is just like, can't wait to get my whiteness all over Japan. I hate Japanese culture, and I just
what?
want to make it white. Yeah, that's like literally like there's a line where he's
I mean,
like,
he's not literally saying that.
yeah, no, he says like
Oh my God.
he says like I hate your art and your music, and we're gonna sing our songs and our music and our art. Like, and he's like talks about like colonization on a regular basis, and then he like has a moment where he's like, well, my country's best export, he's like this like weird half Scottish accent, is violence. You know what I mean? And I'm like, uh, you know,
This is not selling me on the show, by
I
the way.
know.
I saw the first episode because it was free on YouTube,
Right.
and I watched it. And I'm not gonna lie, I finished it and was like,
Not for you.
okay. I was just like, I
Right.
don't really know what I just watched, and I have no compulsion to watch another episode.
That's fine. I had the opposite.
So this makes a lot of
I had
sense.
the opposite reaction where I saw it and I was like, this is
Okay.
so freaking cool. I love everything about this. I don't know if it's in the first episode, but they literally have like a point where they play the Kill Bill music as she's like going on her mission or whatever. And it's like, dun, 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 and, oh,
Yeah.
it's so good. But it's amazing. Like, it's amazing. It's an amazingly well done series. And again, despite being, again, the wokest thing to ever exist, it is like, the last thing is like every character that's good is like disabled, right? Like you know what I mean? Like, again, it's like if we're gonna have good characters that are actually just purely good, they're gonna be blind or missing their hands, or something else.
Okay.
And she's also like she's an unkillable badass woman who like regularly defeats like every
Just kind
man
of goes okay.
that she meets, right? She doesn't
Oh,
lose
so
like,
why is okay? Well, I guess you like the art style of
yeah, I
Blue
think
Eye
it's great.
Samurai.
I
I'm
think
guessing.
it's interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like the
Okay.
art style. The characters are all deep. Like they all have
Except for the
complexity.
villain.
Even he, you understand. No, he's kind of one dimensional. No, frankly, he's a bit one dimensional. He's interesting. He's interesting because
Okay.
he's like smart and he like outwits everybody and he's like, kind of just overpowered. But he's not. He's probably one of the least complex characters of the series, where
Okay.
he's just like, you know, just sort of like, I'm evil. I know I'm evil. There's like a point where he talks to a statue of Jesus and he's just like, I know I haven't really talked and we don't get along, but like, and I don't like you and you don't like me, but like, if this stuff happens to go my way, then like, I'll give you the credit. Hey, and like the point of it is not to say like, I think religion's stupid. I think it's more or less like this guy doesn't understand how that's not how religion works, right? Like,
Yeah, he doesn't really care. He's irreligious in that context.
yeah. But it's just a kind of interesting little scene. And he's just sort of laughably bad, but it's all well done. Like it's all compelling. The characters have, again, clear motivations, but also they're complex. Like the main character is constantly fighting with her commitment to revenge versus giving up on it and like finding a normal life, right? And finding like satisfaction someplace else. Could she live, not without having to kill off her dad when that's the only thing that she's ever lived for? And all the characters grow, and then like most of them regress, right, by the end. And so that's another thing I know a lot of people would have a problem with that. Like a lot of the people, like I said, in the shores of like the more conservative side that I exist in, a lot of them would be like, no, it's not character progression. They went back. They didn't grow. It's like, no, they did grow and then they regress. It is an arc. It's just not a fun arc for people that want to see people get better, right? And do well. But so yeah, so she has this full kind of like arc in the first season of getting over it and then kind of like getting sucked back into the revenge thing at the end. And then same thing with multiple characters, right? Multiple characters are like, I just want to be free. I want to get out of politics. And then they're like, oh, well, actually, I'm going to rule politics, right? So like they're all complex and interesting. None of these are two-dimensional, just all I am is a critique, right? And it's kind of interesting because like, the whole show is about racism, right, as well, because the Japanese people hate her because she's white, right? And it's at a time when you're not allowed to be white in Japan. So it's like racism bad. But at the same time, it's kind of like, well, this bad guy kind of proves them right. You know what I mean? So it doesn't take a one-dimensional look at any of its critiques. And while it is like father figures bad, there's the one father figure, George Takei's character, who actually does like have the best heart for the person, right? Who actually does care about this person. And while I'm not your literal father, I did raise you pretty much. And I've always tried to put you in a position where you could do the best with yourself. So there's all, and same thing with the blacksmith, right? The sort of pseudo father figure for the samurai, is he's also trying to give her advice. He's also like a good male figure, right? So like it's not just a one-dimensional look at this thing, right? There's more complexity there. There's characters that, you know, while they might hate somebody, understand that I have to put that hate aside for a little while, right? And there's all sorts of little twists and turns, versus if it was bad, right? All of this would be on its face and everyone would be like, this show just sucks. It's this woke show that's just critiquing all these things. And what's funny is the reviews reflect that. Like, She-Hulk doesn't get another season, and Blue Eye Samurai is instantly renewed for season 2, right?
So your argument is effectively the quality over, if the quality of a show from like a technical perspective overshadows the ideology, or like the
Not exactly. What I really think is there's this dirty secret that all artists kind of know, but nobody really brings up for some reason, and that's that like your messaging slash the ideology of your thing, the purpose of it, matters kind of less than the art itself. So I would call this kind of transcendent, right? Like when all the pieces parts come together to make up something more than simply what's on the tin, then that's when you get something that's truly transcendent, something truly good, or interesting, or the phrase I like to use, and I highly recommend everyone start using this. I don't like objective. Objective brings in absolutes and people get confused and fight about it. I think better is undeniable. So you could say it's undeniably interesting, or it's undeniably, so like Taylor Swift, right? Is she a good musician? Is she a bad musician? Well, is she objectively the best, the greatest of all time? That's going to start fights. What instead you can say is she's undeniably one of the most successful musicians of all time. That's true. You can't deny that. You can't say she's not one of the most successful persons. You can't say she's objectively the most successful, or she's because like someone's going to, on what standard or whatever. Becoming undeniable is more important. And so how I look at this is like, you know, woke movies aren't bad because they're woke. And like, just like it's ridiculous to say a Christian movie is bad because it's Christian, right? Or a, you know, any movie of any culture or ideology or whatever is bad because of that thing, right? That's like, it'd be like saying you can't write make a good church, right? You can be an atheist and still go to the Notre Dame and be like, wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. Yeah. And you can disagree with all the songs of, you know, most rap has like atrocious lyrics, but you could still listen to, or not even be, sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes you just start tapping your foot. You're just like, oh shoot, I'm into this music, I guess. And I didn't mean to be into it. I didn't think about it. It's that compelling. Right. And so what that is mostly every work, every movie, everything that's made, every piece of art has sort of two levels, right? There's the subjective critique, which is like, do I like the ideology? Do I like the subject matter? Do I like the genre? Right? That's all like kind of like very wishy-washy subjective. And then there's like the concrete building elements of a film, of a movie, of a painting. And so you can make a painting or a film or a movie or a building that is undeniably amazing or interesting despite the genre, despite the what's on the tin, despite what it says. And what's funny is what it says is almost less important, because like you'll hear a song, right? Like you've heard Hallelujah, right? Like the
Yeah.
Hallelujah. So I've seen that played at like weddings. Right? It's yeah, and at churches, and you're like, this is a very non-religious song, but the music is imparting more meaning than the lyrics to that song, right? So the like the content of the actual what's being said is less important, and you sort of have this like Fortunate Son, right, is another one where like it's an anti, patriot song, right? It's sort of like
It's an anti-war song
it's
for
an
sure.
anti-war
Yeah.
song, but it's sort of become like essentially a battle march. Like the helicopters fly in, and then you hear like, some folks are born proud of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
flag, and it's like,
That's a good point.
and we're like, yeah, hoorah! It's like a hoorah song. It's become a patriotic song, and
Yeah.
all the lyrics are anti-patriotic, right? They're like, hey, I'm not here to wave the flag. I don't believe in the red, white, and blue, and we're like, hoorah! Like it's so funny because like you can be somebody that doesn't like the thing, but like that tune undoes the lyrics. The tune is a hoorah tune, right? And the hallelujah is a reverent tune. And even though the lyrics are irreverent, right? And even though the thing is saying I'm against this thing,
Yeah.
all the pieces parts that make up that supersede that. Right. And so this is why you can have someone that doesn't like, I don't like country, I don't like a genre. And then they go, oh, well, except for, and there's that one song that they'll say, like, that one's good. And that's because if it's truly amazing, you don't have to lean on the messaging or the genre or the ideology.
All right,
Right.
so here's where I want to kind of give a little pushback though, because I don't disagree with that, and it
Right.
does still sound like if I understand correctly, um, that the if the quality of the art or the story is good enough and it can overshadow the ideology or the themes or so forth. It basically the quality can triumph over that. So
Right.
that's why basically you can have a show that's considered woke or bad in some areas and still be considered good and people will enjoy it, as opposed to if you have crap quality, you're going to notice the themes more. That
Yeah.
stuff. If it's bad, it's going to be bad all the way through. Like the quality is where you have to start. Makes sense. That's correct. But then here's my pushback, which is
Okay.
take Arcane, because I'm one of those people who I think Arcane is a good show. I think it's an above average show. I don't think it's a great show. I think it got way overhyped. I think people love it way too much and like praise it way too much. If Arcane wasn't so ideologically driven, wouldn't it make it a better show?
So I actually don't think so at all. Like,
Really?
yeah.
So like, if the male characters weren't more well-rounded, or the female characters a little bit more well-rounded, because you
I
could
feel like
say
they're
that like
pretty well rounded.
all the masculine traits are portrayed negatively in that show, basically,
Yeah. Well,
or unless they are embodied by a woman, and it's like, well, come
I,
on.
I think the problem is,
And most of the females in that show do not embody they embody masculine traits, they do not embody feminine traits. So it's kind of just this inversion where you're just like, oh, so it's these traits are bad in men but they're good in women, and you're like, okay, so that's not really that realistic. It should be negative in both, or you could show an inversion of both. You could do a lot more if it was more detailed, if it was better written. and
yeah.
and my biggest issue is the pacing on that show is terrible. It's just awful. It is atrocious with that pacing. It is atrocious. Like it made me pull my hair out. Like every single time I finished an episode, I binged it because I was like, okay, I
Hmm.
finally have to watch this just for the sake of watching it, so I can give my opinion, so I can like understand what people are talking about.
Hmm.
And every single episode, I would stop it and then sit there and think, okay, do I really want to watch another episode of this? Because I
Right.
don't understand what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Like I understand the story wise, but pacing, it was bad.
So yeah,
So
this is slightly a different topic, because what we're this is sort of talking about is like, um, you're getting into personal preference and why we notice things. But I think the biggest thing is like, you have an antenna out for this stuff, right? And if you didn't have an antenna out and you were just watching it, and this wasn't a big deal to you, because let's say you already agreed with all the ideology of it, I don't think you would notice any of that, right? Now, I think it has some of that. I actually don't think it's as played up as you make it be out to be, because there's like that very strong female like warlord girl, and she's like very masculine, and it's not necessarily good, and she's just kind of viewed as like terrifying. um and so like there's this idea that like it's sort of just a critique on like violence in general, even Vi's violence. Like you kind of get a little scared by it when she goes down and almost kills like a kid, and then he does kill a kid, and then you're like, oh, this is just sort of where violence leads. It's sort of a violence begets violence sort of argument. But I think the problem, like the fact is, like, to be honest, like you're in the minority, right? Like critics and
Oh,
fans
for sure.
and most people are like, I'm fine with this. Now, I think what happens is if you have like a little antenna out for ideology, it's a swaying effect, right? Like, so clearly, like it's sort of like if you already didn't like country, right? And then I said, oh, there's the best country song ever, and you heard it and you're like, yeah, but it's still country, right? To me, that's what it is with like Arcane or something. It's like, yeah, it's really, really good, but it's still this thing that I'm not a fan of, right?
Well, that's so I would say though that it's, yes, I do pick up on it more, but it's not because I dislike the ideology. It's because I think that they make bad stories. It's the same thing as Christian films.
Mhm.
If you watch a movie that's billed as a Christian film,
Right.
the story is usually terrible. It doesn't matter if you agree with the ideas behind it, it's still a bad story because it's not realistic. It's the complete opposite of what
Right.
typically
Well,
stories are trying to portray. So when I talk about Arcane, my issues again aren't necessarily like, oh, well, they, I hate the ideas behind it. More so, the ideas behind some of the stuff that they're doing don't make sense. Like that's not how the real world works. That's not how characters truly are. And the way that they're portraying it is specifically in a, I don't want to say it's propaganda, but it's in one direction where it's
Right.
like if you had changed it slightly, it could have been better.
Well, so
I like that,
I
like the character of Echo. You could have had Echo have a negative trait,
right.
or you could have had characters who were men have, not because some of them are portrayed with positive notes, but you could have had feminine traits portrayed negatively. But in the entire show, there's not one feminine trait that's portrayed negatively. They're all positive. And it's like
Right.
that's not realistic. Feminine traits exist. They can be very negative as well, just as masculine traits can be negative,
Right. But
and vice
again,
versa.
though, and I think you're kind of pointing this out with your own argument, is like, I think that's an inversion, right? Your problem is, well, here's this quality issue, and that's leading me to notice the ideological, perhaps, origin of that quality issue, right? But the issue is a quality issue in storytelling that then leads to this thing. So I have a quote here I wrote down, and it's that the issue isn't that there is an ideology. The issue is that all there is an ideology, right? So the issue with most of these things is like, it's like with She-Hulk or whatever, is like, it's not that, it has an ideology. You have a point, which is like everything has some sort of implicit like moral to it or story that you're telling. You can't really
It's
help.
the point of storytelling,
Right.
yes.
Well, whenever you tell a story, it has some sort of an implicit like
there's an implicit moral
right?
in every
Yeah,
there's an implicit moral in every story.
Ends. Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
you can even have an unpleasant story, but the moral of it still is like, look how badly it ends for people that are horrible, right? Like you could have
Not even that,
or something.
Super Mario movie.
Mhm.
That is a movie that has an implicit moral. What's the implicit moral? That you never give up, that you always stand by your family,
Right.
always fight against, someone who's trying to do harm. Those are all morals in them.
Right.
They're not explicitly stated. They're not something that people are thinking out loud.
Right.
But it's there because you see the actions of what we consider the hero and what they do and accomplish. Even if he failed, we could still say that's the hero. That's who we want to emulate. So that's
Right.
what we mean. That's what I mean by every story has a moral.
Yeah.
Every story.
Or
does.
you could still, yeah, exactly. Well, I don't want to get too off onto that. I do think it's an interesting topic, perhaps for another call. But the fact is, if all that's there is the messaging, then yeah, the thing is only the sum of its parts, right? So like an analogy to help maybe understand this is like if you have a tattoo and the tattoo says like, I hate beauty, and it's just like scribbled on, barely put in any effort into it, you're just going to look at that and be like, yeah, okay, that's the statement, that's what it is. Or if it's just in Helvetica, you're like, all right, this guy hates beauty. But if you have that same sentence, you can even say the words, I hate beauty, right? You can say this is an anti-military song, but then you have this tattoo and it's beautifully done, right? It's like, ornate and the lettering's great and it's like, you know, they've put in so much effort into detail, you can't help but like go like, well, no, it means the opposite, right? Like so like you can have an ideology that says something, right? But if you're telling the truth, if you're making the best art you can make, it doesn't matter really what the ideology is, because the truth, the beauty is going to come through that, right? It's gonna overwhelm it, and so it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter. So that's what's funny is like, and it doesn't even have to be, the whole thing doesn't have to be great, right? I have another example that I want to hold up real quick here, which is
Well,
like
while you do,
John Wick. It's
there
like
you go.
John Wick doesn't have a great story. I don't even know what the ideology is really. Like revenge, don't kill dogs, I guess is like the moral of the story. But like, what it does so well that everyone goes like, look, it's undeniably a fun action movie. It's undeniable. Right? It does something that's undeniably interesting, and then the rest of it is sort of secondary, right? It's like, look, the point of this film isn't necessarily to come away from it feeling like a better ideologue, right? A better Christian, a better Muslim, a better whatever. The point
Yeah,
of it
yeah.
is to come away going, damn, that was cool. And it does
Well,
that really, really well. And so that's what's funny is you can have, I mean, John Wick could even be a villain. He could be a horrible, I mean, kind of is. He is like an assassin, right? He's not like a good
well,
person.
that's the thing is
But you
he's
can
very
still walk
much.
away going like,
Oh no,
that
there's
was
totally
great.
moral in this. I could easily pull this out right now.
Okay.
Justice. There is a theme of justice
Okay.
throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
Someone comes along, picks a fight, you know, acts basically is acting as a bully
Right.
in the real world, in the modern world, picks a fight, and unfortunately, the justice is that, and John Wick as a character embodies
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
this angel of vengeance.
What's that called? The Baba Yaga, right? Like you
Yeah,
happen to,
he's
yeah. Yeah.
in
You picked
a
a fight with Michael the Archangel. You picked a fight with the
yeah.
boogeyman.
It's an
Yeah.
avenging angel type of thing
Yeah.
of no. Now justice will be met out upon you for for the sins that you have committed.
Right.
That's all it is, and it feels great for the audience
Mhm.
because we see things in the real world where that doesn't happen. So it's nice to see that happen,
Right.
even if it's on a story.
Yes, exactly.
And it is a warning to people of doing that. Hey, there is justice that comes. Justice may not be in this world in this case, because in this case he is basically a mythical figure because he
Mhm.
never dies. He does all this crazy stuff and never dies and all
Yes.
that. So yeah, I'm with you there. But that does
Well,
make sense. I do see your point because those fight scenes are kick ass, at least in the first one. I haven't
yeah.
seen the other ones.
I like them all to a certain extent. I think 1 and 4, the bookends, are kind of the best
Okay.
ones. And you can literally just watch 1 and then watch 4. You don't really need to watch the middle ones. Like, it's all it is. Is like the plot is like, oh, I'm a hobo guy that like uses pigeons to talk to people, and he's my buddy. And like the Assassins Guild is kind of corrupt. Who knew? Like, you know, and like so now it's us versus them. And so,
So
yeah.
I do want to push that though. That again brings me back to my point of wouldn't it be better? Because that's again my argument isn't that Arcane is bad.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it's bad. I still think it's above average. I think it's a
Hmm.
good show. I think it could have been better.
So
And
let me try to explain this, okay? Because
okay,
I'll run into this a lot, okay?
yeah,
So imagine this the opposite. Like let's invert this, right? So if you take like Lord of the Rings, right? That's
yeah,
like one of the best films ever. Everyone agrees it's one of the best films ever, and it is inherently kind of religious, right? It's inherently somewhat Catholic. There's a quote from Tolkien, right, which he says, "The Lord of the Rings is, of course, fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously so at first, but consciously in revision." Now, I would like if everything stayed kind of unconsciously, whatever the ideology is. I think it tends to lend to better storytelling.
okay,
But the imagine if you watched Lord of the Rings and then you were like, "Oh, it's really, really good." I wish it would be better if it was more diverse, right? Like there are people that feel that way. Now you wouldn't feel that way. You'd be like, "No, that would make it worse." But they would actually feel better if it had something more for their ideology, right? So I think when you come to something like Arcane and you go, "Well, it's good." But it'd be better if it embodied some of my ideals, right? And so what that looks like is sort of like that's the that's like the all the pegs aligning, right? So like there's the subjective pegs, and then there's the, I don't want to say objective, but like the core things that actually make a film and a story. And when the subjective stuff and the things align, that's where you get like your favorite movie. So that's in the case of like Blade Runner, for instance, right? There might be someone that's like, oh, I really love it. I just hate sci-fi. Like, if it was in another genre, I'd love it. And that's the same with music, where you're like, oh, yeah, I recognize it's really good, but if it was this other, if you just didn't have that twang, I would enjoy it so much more. And so to me, that's what I think a lot of that is when I hear these sorts of critiques of someone saying, well, I really, really love this thing, but it's just a little too whatever for me. It's like, okay, that's the subjective part doesn't work for you. That's fine. But the objective stuff, the stuff that is like, is it good? Is it well shot? Is it all these other things? Like, if that is good, the thing generally scores, right? It generally scores
Yeah.
broadly. And then there's individuals that are going to go like, I think it would be better if it did these things. I'd probably tend to agree with you, but I also think there's a large group of people that would go, no, actually, I liked it because it didn't do that, right? Because it didn't have throw a bone out to the, to whoever.
I think there's a difference between there is a tight balance to do, because there's a difference between ideology and then telling a story that goes against normal conventions, which is not a bad thing, and it is not ideology.
Well,
I think a good example though is Lord of the Rings, is Eowyn.
Right.
Eowyn wants to embody masculine traits and finds out what that means and realizes, oh, this isn't all it's cracked up to be. As a character, at least in the books. It's kind of seen in the movie, but in the books especially, it's played out. But that's kind of where it's like
also shown to like be strong, right? She's not shown to just, oh, I'm just weak because I'm a woman.
But part of her character growth also, especially in the book, is that she realizes that you can be strong and with feminine trait. Like, there are strong feminine traits, and those are just as important as having strong masculine traits, or the strength that you have in masculine traits is offset by the strength in feminine traits, and those are good things to have. That's where it's like Blue Eye Samurai. Watching the first episode, when I say it wasn't for me, it meant like it was more like I just didn't know why she was doing what she was doing, and I was like, okay, am I going to finish this show, or am I going to watch? I have a bunch of other stuff I need to watch. So
I don't. Somehow you keep watching like Willy Wonka and these weird, and I'm like,
the Wonka
movie,
yeah,
and not watching the stuff I'm sending you.
Because I was like, okay, I should probably watch this, and it turns out it was a musical, but they did not market it that way. I'm not the biggest musical fan, but no, like a good example is like I watched the Blue Eye Samurai, watched the first episode. By the end of it, I was like, okay, I don't actually know why she's doing any of this. Like, none of that motivation is ever given, and that's when I was like, and then that's when I was like, okay, it's on the back burner, and I'll get to it eventually, but I'm probably not going to finish it now, because that's something that's kind of important to me. Like, why are you doing this?
It's definitely fleshed out and very it makes a lot of sense why.
But her being a female character doing all this didn't bother me whatsoever, especially because like the whole weight thing, it kind of annoyed me. I was like, oh, she's a better fighter than everyone, and then she drops weight and you're like, okay, that makes sense. I get that. It is a little kind of ridiculous at times because that's kind of a trope, but I can get over that. I don't care about it.
Well, that's something I actually like about Blue Eye Samurai is it leans into its tropes. It knows what tropes it's referencing, and it's not doing it so annoyingly where it's like, this is that thing you like, which is like the Marvel way of talking about a trope, but it's he's behind me, isn't he, or whatever it is. But it's also not afraid to like play the Kill Bill. They know it's Kill Bill. They like, look, we are obviously playing off of Kill Bill. She's getting revenge with the samurai, so we're just gonna play the music subtly, but like change it slightly. And then you're like, if you're not, it might even be in the first episode, I don't know, but if you're not paying attention, it will just like go by and you're like, oh, interesting. But you're paying attention, like, oh, that's the rift. Like that's what they're doing with that. So yeah, they do a really good job with that. It's one of the reasons why I think it's such a cool series.
I don't think you're wrong overall. I do like this theory because I do agree.
Right. No, I'm just right. There is no overall.
No, there's overall. There's overall. Listen, I had a guy tell me one time that he lost money in principle, and was like, "Sir, what do you mean by in principle?" I was like, "Oh, so you didn't lose the money. You just feel like you lost the money. That's nice. Thank you for that. But move along."
Anyway.
But I do like the idea because it is true. Like, I think too often, when you see a lot of modern entertainment, you see that it's like so much of a focus on the themes behind her, like what's the theme of this or something, where it's just like,
who's in it, or what's the it's like, is it good? That's all I care about. So here's a great example.
I watched Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny finally.
What are you doing? And you're like I can't watch Blue Eye Samurai, this amazing series that even if you don't love it is definitely better than Dial of Destiny.
Well, that's the thing.
I'm
Is I
gonna
was like, okay,
subject myself to the pain.
have
Of
you watched
Dial
it?
of no, I refuse. On principle, I
Why not?
refuse to watch things I know I'm not gonna like.
But how do you know? But that's the thing
I
is
don't care.
watching
It's
it
not
is
for
a good
me.
example of like, okay, why is this like it bombed? So I watched it, and the truth is, the movie is competent in that it's not like The Room,
Mhm.
um,
I
where
mean,
you're
if
gonna
that's
be.
your bar, it's like
Well, yes,
literally a
yes.
movie that's famous for how bad it is.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing is there's a difference between those. Like there is a difference between those gaps. But when you watch it, it was not satisfying in any way, shape, or form. So I watched that, and then I went back and watched. I was like, it's supposed to be an Indiana Jones film, and it does not feel like an Indiana Jones film.
Hmm.
Like the first 45 minutes, it's like 2 hours and 30 minutes long, and the
Wow.
first 45 minutes is just like nonstop action scenes. And I'm like, I know I'm supposed to like this. Like I know they think
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
supposed to like this, but I don't like this. So I
Well,
went back. Well, here
yeah,
you're
go
gonna
for
hate
it.
me so
Oh,
much
go
for this.
golly.
So I went back and I was like, okay, I'm going to watch because I remember hating Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Okay.
So I went back and
Uh-oh.
watched Kingdom of the Crystal Skull after Dial of Destiny.
Uh-oh.
It it feels like an Indiana Jones film. Like I'm still not thrilled with the movie. With some of the stuff is kind of ridiculous, and you sit there and you look back and you're like, oh yeah, this is ridiculous. It's not. I'm not a fan of it. But the first half of that movie of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull feels like an Indiana Jones film, which is not action scene after action scene after action scene. It's mainly like things of like, oh, solving riddles and puzzles and oh, well, we have to go here and figure out what this
Hmm.
and you're like, oh, this is what it feels like. There's the like he actually plays as an archaeological professor. You're like,
Hmm.
thank God. Like I like watching it alone, I was just like, yes, this is a better movie. Like I can
You heard it
understand
here
why
first,
this is a
folks.
better movie.
Shia LaBeouf should have took over the franchise. And
Okay, no, so no joke. I remember hating him. I watching Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in the beginning. You're like, no, yeah, this is how you expect this character to act. Like towards the second half of the film is kind of where it starts falling apart. But the first half of the film, you're just like, oh, this is nice.
I was about to play
This is
something
nice.
at risk of demonetizing us. Anybody right now, just look up the vine swing scene. Look up Indiana
No, no, no.
Jones
Trust me,
vine
it's bad.
swing.
Yeah, I watched it recently. It's bad. I did this like last week. It is a bad. It's bad. But that's the thing is like seeing the difference between the two is kind of what mattered to me. Is like the quality of the story was just so much worse in Dial of Destiny that like even though it definitely hits you in the face of like you're supposed to like this because you like Indiana Jones and
Hmm.
you look at it and you're like none of this is good. And then you go to Crystal Skull and you're like okay, I can still say this is a bad it's not a good movie. It's not what I wanted. But I appreciate it's one of those things that like it's like watching Star Wars the going to the
Yeah, yeah,
prequels
yeah,
now.
and yeah. You're
You're
like
like,
they're not so
"Oh,
bad.
I can
Yeah.
appreciate," or even then, like I could appreciate the things they were trying to do then.
Hmm.
It didn't work, but I can appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that's kind
The
of where I see it now.
this is I don't know. We got completely off topic,
We did,
but
we did.
but
It was about the fact that the quality matters. Like the
right,
ideas
right.
behind it can drive it into the ground. And sure enough, there are ideas in Dial of Destiny that are just it's just so shoehorned in. You're just like, what? I
Yeah.
don't like this. I don't like the characters in Dial of Destiny.
Right.
I was just like, I don't. I'm not really rooting for any of you. I kind of want you all to fail.
Right.
Like this
Right.
isn't. That's not a good thing. Like what?
Right.
Don't make your characters a jerk. Like a jerk.
Well,
I
and
don't.
it's also like the biggest problem. Like I had this also kind of written down as a note. It was like, you don't solve that, right? You don't solve Dial Destiny, and you don't solve like the Ray problem, right? By suddenly making them like the inverse ideology, right? If you just made it like
Yes.
so that Indiana
Yes.
Jones is walking around being like, you can't do that, you're a woman, and then like let me handle it, and like that wouldn't make it good, right? It would still be two-dimensional lame characters. It's just now two-dimensional character that's liked by this side and not the other side, right?
Yes.
And so I want to make 2 points for the artists, right? So this whole
Okay.
thing is about artists. And why even talk about this? Well, I think it's um, ideology can get ahead sometimes, right? That's the answer. There's a reason why there's a market for Christian movies and why sometimes they make their money back, right? It's like if you want to serve an ideology, you can just know that you're probably not making something that's going to last, right? You're making something that's like for a small market at a certain time, right? Because these things all change, right? But what doesn't change is loving good movies, loving good storytelling. That's consistent. That's, you know, why the original Star Wars film, the hero's journey or whatever, keeps lasting. Meanwhile, there's plenty of other shows that came out in the 70s and 80s that were more just a product of their era, of their time, targeted at a certain thing, right? Like if you made anything talking about, let's say, Nixon, and it was just literally about Nixon. It wasn't like about, like, you know, Star Wars, where it's sort of a critique of Nixon, but through art. It's just like, Nixon's bad. It was more of a anti-propaganda or pro-propaganda film. That's not really being watched anymore, right? You know, unless it's a historian or someone that's like, oh, this is a good case study to learn about this guy.
Yeah.
So that's something that, like, if you make something that's truly good, it should be timeless. But there's reasons to make things that aren't that way, right? There's things that are propagandistic, or, you know, it's why there's a lot of bad, like, comic book, like, if you I don't know if you ever had this as a kid, but you're like, oh, I'm into comic books, and your parents are like, oh, here's a Christian comic, and you're like, this sucks. How did this get made? And it's like, because Christians funded it, right? And then you go to an art museum and you're like, this art sucks. This is awful. And it's like, but the person that made it is a Marxist or whatever, and that's cool. We like them. And you're like, okay, both of these suck. Like, I don't like the fact that this art is here because of its ideology or because it's statement, right? It's like, oh, it's some sort of statement about something. That's why it's here. And I don't like the fact that, like, you know, you can scoot by on in whatever circles because it's like, we like that, but that can work. But the more encouraging thing to the artist is the opposite, which is that doesn't matter that much. So right now, if you're afraid, if you're like, I don't know if I can tell my story, I don't know if I can put my art out there because, like, you know, I don't know if everyone's going to agree with it. Let's say you're someone that wants to have a gay character in their show, like, or in their whatever it is. If it's good and if it's quality, the people that you want in your audience don't care. Like, the ideologues, yes, they will try to have your thing thrown out, right? If one side or the other, right? People are going to go like, I don't like that thing. I don't like that character. I don't like that you know, I feel this happened with, like, A Quiet Place too, right? It's like, it started out as everyone was like, this is great. And then people started realizing there's somewhat of an ideology there. And they were like, we don't like it now, you know? And you're like, wait a second. Like, we all just agreed this was great. And the same thing with, you know, it's sort of the opposite with, like, Prey, right? Where Prey goes to come out. There's the new Predator film.
The Predator
and
film.
Everyone's like, oh, it's gonna be woke, it's gonna be awful, we all hate it, and then it turns out to not be so, and everyone's like, oh, we like it, right? Like, that's who you want in your audience. You want people that aren't ideologically motivated, that aren't writing off your movie before they've seen it, right? Or your short film or your art piece. You want to court the audience that's concerned with quality, right? And not the people that are driven by ideology, right? So you should first be like, how do I make the best thing? And if you're making it as good as possible and you're honest and you're transparent, then there's going to be an audience for it, right? And there's going to be different flavors. Some people won't like it as much. Some people will like it more.
Well, people will ignore the ideology then. Well, they'll ignore it because you're not making it with ideology at that point. Well, as long as your quality is there, people will enjoy it, and that's what matters.
They're not. Well, yeah, same thing with the genre or whatever it is. So it's really encouraging as an artist. Like, and yes, you can. That an ideology can come along and cancel your film and ruin your thing. Like, that does happen. I'm not saying like if I try to release a film, you know, in France or something like that that was, you know, had a bunch of French characters that were awful, it wouldn't do well there, right? Like, even though most places probably wouldn't care, like, they wouldn't care that there's some sort of like anti-French, you know, bias to the film. So, like, that will happen, but just know that they're not your audience, and that's okay. It's really encouraging. I think it's encouraging for me to see, you know, both like Arcane do well and to see Godzilla do really well. Godzilla's like my film of the year last year, and
Godzilla -1?
Yeah, -1. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't say Godzilla because Godzilla means Godzilla 1999.
-1.
It technically came out in 1998, but we call it Godzilla 2000, and it's got one of the best soundtracks ever.
I still need to rewatch that.
P. Diddy,
for the full
Rage
time.
Against the Machine, Ben Folds 5, Blink 182 is on there. But yeah, Blink 182 is on there.
The other ones kind of make sense for
the Wallflowers. It's incredible. It's not P. Diddy, it's Puff Daddy at that time as well. Puff Daddy at that time.
I'm gonna look this up after this call.
It's so freaking good. So
this is
Fighters.
Me
Foo Fighters.
Oh my goodness, it's giving me Transformers vibes, right? Or it's like Linkin Park, like.
Oh yeah, no, it's it's so much better, so much better. But yeah, okay.
So it's encouraging, right? It's encouraging to see these things do well because you know, like, oh shoot, I could do something that's anywhere from a film about PTSD and war, and you know, it's all just like Japanese male guys getting together and fixing the world, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's so good. I cry every time I watch it. And then also, though, Arcane can do well. I'm like, oh, cool. The quality is what matters here, right? Like the idea of that. Oh, there wasn't enough whoever's in this film didn't play in that, and it didn't play in Arcane, right? Like or the opposite ideology of like it has too much diversity and it has a gay character. Both did well, and I'm happy for both of them. And so, because I knew then to me it's like the system working, right? It's sort of a sign that
Yeah,
like
yeah. The quality is kind of what
working.
matters
That
for it.
what really matters is the quality.
It's quality, and you're good with everything else. And
Right.
I don't disagree with that. So, but that also then leads to a good. So I see your theory. I agree with it, although there are some points that I'm pushing back on, which
Right.
I'm sure we can go into more detail on another time. But I also know that your wife will kill me if I keep you on too long. So that is a good time for us to turn to, because you mentioned that we got some work on Tycho Decay that
Speaking
we
of
did.
quality.
Yeah, speaking of quality,
Yeah, you're the
come
best
over
quality
here and
ever.
let's show us the best quality here, which
Yeah.
is Tycho Decay.
Yeah.
Do you like horror short films? Do you like monsters? We're here to show
the
you.
yeah, so I'll probably put this up at some point. I don't have a great way to show. Well, maybe let's see. Do I have a reference here?
No, you don't. I don't know. Maybe.
Shoot. Oh, this is annoying. There's a file that I don't know where it's at, but I'll have to just live with showing you guys the lower quality version of it. But so anyway, so let me get my share screen up. Hey, come on. Oh my goodness.
That's just a picture of your stomach.
That's just my shirt. So I did this fun when you're doing motion, when you're doing any sort of animation, reference is everything. And so I built myself this little custom rig here to kind of emulate the kind of deforestinator, our weapon.
Yeah.
Because it's a very weird shape. Most guns you hold from the bottom, right? And this one you hold on the top, and then it kind of comes out forward quite a ways. So I took my tripod, taped it up, put a handle on it, so I could kind of see what it would like. And it's pretty heavy tripod. And got kind of moved through the motions here, got all the animation together, to build good reference for Lucid Studios, who's helping animate this whole thing. Oh, I'm covered you up with Anne here. Let me.
Yeah, that's fine. Nobody cares to see my face.
So, with this as a reference, we have done the first pass. I will get some changes. It's going to be refined as it goes, but we have kind of the first pass of our rigged Anne animating. So that's progress, man. I sent it out to everyone in our Slack, everyone that's been working on the short film, and I was like, you know what? It's slow and steady, but long as we get across that finish line, that's all I care about. So we're slowly building this thing. It's coming together. Finally got some animation on the end.
What's the so is next week working more on the animation still, or is this kind of then at the polishing stage, and the next portion is to move on to the next
we're
stuff
still working on the animation. I think she's
Okay.
holding it a little high. There's a few other things that like I've noted to the team.
Yeah.
Also like she goes through like all the cycles, and really we just need it to go through this one, just the X.
Oh yeah, then yeah, we definitely don't.
So we'll be playing with like some tweaks. We might add like a small run up, like 2 steps as she comes up to the screen, just because to have that action in that shot. Yeah, and then what I think I'm gonna work on myself this week is, now that we kind of have our full thing here, is I might try to get some cool poses going and do like a 3D printer too. See if I can't get a little statue of Anne together.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'm pretty hyped about that. You can look at my goofy. It feels dorky until people see it and they're like buying the posters and wearing your merch and doing all the cool stuff in the movies. Like, because all actors feel goofy, you know what I mean? But
Getting pretty
animators.
bold there.
I'm not saying me. I'm not saying it's gonna happen to me. I'm just saying to like the.
I don't think you've met a lot of actors. They got some big egos.
That's true. Maybe on set they're like, I'm the coolest guy ever. I think you always feel kind of dorky. I don't know how actors take themselves seriously. That's one of the things I have the hardest thing doing with any of this stuff is I'm like, dude, I'm like wiggling around this thing and I'm supposed to like, especially when they're acting on a green screen or whatever, and they're like waggling around. I'm like, how are you supposed to take yourself seriously and like cry in a mode and act when you're like, I know I'm just standing in a blue room with a bunch of people like watching me.
That's stories for another time, I think. Stories for
Yeah.
another time. But
Yeah.
no, that sounds good, man. It looks good. I like it. Yeah, I noticed you'd posted in Slack, so it's good to see that it's actually making progress. I do like the motion of it. I
Yeah.
do see like yeah, there are things we can change on it
Yeah. There's some
slightly,
tweaks.
but it's overall, I mean, basically once we have that complete, it's just putting her and Marmaduke into the scene,
Yeah.
and then
It's
we're
it's
done
getting
with that whole
every
portion of it.
it's getting everybody in there um and then it's just like refining. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
only
but
problem
that's
with everything I just said is that means you actually do have to make good art, right? Like so
yeah,
if the short came out and it was really sucky, right? But it had like a message about like this is very obvious and on the nose, then people would be like, well, I liked it because it only the people that
yeah.
the message was for. Or if
There,
like here's the other thing you could do, like this you can make it really bad but then make it for like a very niche audience, right? This is sort of the secret of like exploitation filmmaking, right? It's like, hey, look, our budget sucks and the dumpy monster movie's dumpy, but like here's a sexy looking chick and now all of a sudden it sells, right? So you have this like dumpy crappy movie but like, well, at least there's a hot girl in it, right? Or like, oh, at least
yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah. I
violence that
mean,
I can't get someplace in
there's
it. Like,
also always, and this is something that I will always triumph and kind of state is that people understand when you don't have all the resources. Like
right.
when you're not Hollywood, people look at it and can be like, yeah, it's not perfect, but for what you did, good enough. And can enjoy that. You can appreciate that type of stuff. Um, that's again, if you see bad CGI, Dial of Destiny, a lot of the CGI was actually not nearly as bad as you would think. Like
Yeah.
on like Harrison Ford, like the de-aging
Hmm.
stuff. Some of it was pretty bad, but it was one of those things where like, okay, I see where the budget went. Unfortunately, that's not what the problem was.
Yeah.
Problem
It's
wasn't the CG.
rarely,
It's
it's
like,
very rarely in modern movies where the problem is like, oh, it was such a good film if only the CGI didn't suck, right? Like very
yeah,
rarely is that the movie. It's almost always like everything's the problem and then you start to go like and the CGI and the message and then now it's just
yeah,
garbage, right?
yeah.
But I feel like CGI is the same way, like when nothing
Well,
else is distracting you from looking at the scenery. Like if you walk into
yeah,
like a hotel room and it's been an amazing experience from the desk to the room, you don't really notice like the paint peeling in the corner someplace. But if it's been awful the whole time and then you just start looking, you're like, and this and that and like you just start like, and that thing wasn't composited very well. It's like, okay, that's because of the story failed to hold your attention. The characters weren't interesting because there's all sorts of stuff that is bad CG, like old movies that we'll still
oh
tolerate.
yeah,
Like we'll still go back and watch an old movie and no one's like,
oh
oh, I
God,
can't
yeah,
watch whatever from the 60s or so. I can't watch
dude.
uh
Big Trouble in Little
2001.
China. Trust me, Big Trouble in Little China.
Well,
I will go to my grave. That is a top three movie for me. Top three. That movie is
yeah,
so good.
the visual effects weren't the problem with that movie or the saving grace of that movie.
What do you mean there are no problems with that movie? It's a top three movie. Top three movie. We will go into it
You
one day. We
confuse
will
me,
go into
Rob.
it one
He's
day.
like Arcane mid, Big Trouble in Little China
Dude, that
amazing. I don't
I
have
could do
time to watch things like Blue Eye Samurai,
I could
but
do a whole essay
Dial of
on Big Trouble.
Destiny,
No, I could do a
I'm
whole essay on
there.
Big Trouble in Little China. Don't get out of here with this nonsense. All right, we're ending it there before I get no. We're
Alrighty. Well,
all right.
now we let
Well,
the audience decide. Did I piss everyone off, or did I give some nuance to this topic of go woke, go broke? Let's see.
who cares what the audience thinks? You pissed me off. That's all that
No,
matters.
okay.
All right. Well, everybody, we thank you for watching, and we hope that you got something valuable out of this. And we will see you next time.
Adios.